Hey guys, today we are going to look at the short story called War by Luigi Pirandello. He is an Italian author. I wish I could do better justice to how to truly say his name. This short story is going to feature a lot about World War One because that is a unit that we are now about to look at. Italy had a very interesting place in history where World War One was concerned. After all, Italy had just become a country, a unified country, and not just a bunch of like random city states, just prior to the war. And for the government to come in at that point and tell them we're going to fight for our national pride, that would have been a really new concept for them. When you're looking at this short story, I would suggest jotting down who the different people are that are talking to you. You're not going to have specific names. You're not going to have Sally and Joe and Sue. You're not going to have that. You are going to have mother or wife and husband and fat red faced man. That's going to be how he's known. So I would jot down who they are, and then I would also look at how they see war and how they see their place in war. The conversation that they're about to have on this train that's traveling from point A to point B in Italy. It's going to be very interesting, and it will be very much about the war. And when you're picturing this train car, it's going to be a space that maybe I think six, eight adults at the most could fit in. These seats would be facing each other, so there would be long benches that would be facing each other, and there would be truly no way to escape conversation with the people who are sitting near you. It's very confined, it's very tight, it's very um, gosh, it is a space where you have to talk to other people. So this is called war. The passengers who had left Rome by the night express had to stop until dawn at the small station of Fabriano in order to continue their journey by the small old-fashioned local joining the main line with Simona. At dawn, in a stuffy and smoky second class carriage in which five people had already spent the night, a bulky woman in deep mourning was hoisted in, almost like a shapeless bundle. Behind her, puffing and moaning, followed her husband, a tiny man, thin and weakly, his face death white, his eyes small and bright, and looking shy and uneasy. Having at last taken a seat, he politely thanked the passengers who had helped his wife and who had made room for her. Then he turned round to the woman trying to pull down the collar of her coat and politely inquired, "Are you all right, dear?" The wife, instead of answering, pulled up her collar again to her eyes so as to hide her face. "Nasty world," muttered the husband with a sad smile. And he felt it his duty to explain to his traveling companions that the poor woman was to be pitied, for the war was taking away from her her only son, a boy of 20 to whom both had devoted their entire life, even breaking up their home at Sulmona to follow him to Rome, where he had to go as a student, then allowing him to volunteer for war with an assurance, however, that at least 6 months he would not be sent to the front. And now, all of a sudden, receiving a wire saying that he was due to leave in 3 days' time and asking them to go and see him off. Guys, these are seriously devoted parents. This they followed him to Rome, like they relocated their lives for school. This would be the equivalent of your parents packing up their homes and following you to college. Hmm. The woman under the big coat was twisting and wriggling, at times growling like a wild animal, feeling certain that all those explanations would not have aroused even a shadow of sympathy from those people who most likely were in the same plight as herself. One of them, who had been listening with particular attention, said, "You should thank God that your son is only now leaving for the front. Mine has been sent there the first day of the war. He has already come back twice wounded and been sent back again to the front." Press pause. Before these interesting travelers get into a conversation of, well, my story is worse than your story. No, my story is the worse than your story. Has this mother lost her child? Is her child dead? No. She just got news that her child was being sent to the front. Now, that certainly was not good news. The front was not a safe place to be, but he's not dead. She's kind of acting like it, though. Well, what about me? I have two sons and three nephews at the front, said another passenger. Maybe, but in our case, it is our only son, ventured the husband. What difference can it make? You may spoil your son by excessive attentions, but you cannot love him more than you would all your other children if you had any. Paternal love is not like bread that can be broken to pieces and split amongst the children in equal shares. A father gives all his love to each one of his children without discrimination, whether it be one or 10. And if I am suffering now for my two sons, I'm not suffering half for each of them, but double. True, true, sighed the embarrassed husband. But suppose, of course, we all hope it will never be the case, a father has two sons at the front and he loses one of them. There is still one left to console him while "Yes," answered the other, getting cross. A son left to console him, but also a son left for whom he must survive, while in the case of the father of an only son, if the son dies, the father can die too and put an end to his distress. Which of the two positions is worse? Don't you see how my case would be worse than yours? Seriously, they're arguing right now about a lot of hypothetical issues. Nonsense, interrupted another traveler, a fat, red faced man with bloodshot eyes of the palest gray. He was panting. From his bulging eyes seemed to spurt inner violence of an uncontrolled vitality which his weakened body could hardly contain. Nonsense, he repeated, trying to cover his mouth with his hand so as to hide the two missing front teeth. Nonsense. Do we give life to our own children for our own benefit? The other travelers stared at him in distress. The one who had had his son at the front since the first day of the war sighed, "You are right. Our children do not belong to us. They belong to the country." "Bosh!" retorted the fat traveler. "Do we think of the country when we give life to our children? Our sons are born well, because they must be born, and when they come to life, they take our own life with them. This is the truth. We belong to them, but they never belong to us. And when they reach 20, they are exactly what we were at their age. We too had a father and mother, but there were so many other things as well: girls, cigarettes, illusions, new ties, and the country, of course, whose call we would have answered when we were 20, even if father and mother had said no. Now, at our age, the love of our country is still great, of course, but stronger than it is the love of our children. Is there any one of us here who wouldn't gladly take his son's place at the front if he could?" There was a silence all round, everybody nodding as to approve. "Why, then," continued the fat man, "should we consider the feelings of our children when they are 20? Isn't it natural that at their age they should consider the love for their country, I'm speaking of decent boys, of course, even greater than the love for us? Isn't it natural that it should be so, as after all they must look upon us as old boys who cannot move any more and must sit at home? If country is a natural necessity, like bread, of which each of us must eat in order not to die of hunger, somebody must go to defend it. And our sons go when they are 20. And they don't want tears because if they die inflamed and happy. I am speaking, of course, of decent boys. Now, if one dies young and happy without having the ugly sides of life, the boredom of it, the pettiness, the bitterness of disillusion, what more can we ask for him? Everyone should stop crying. Everyone should laugh, as I do, or at least thank God, as I do, because my son, before dying, sent me a message saying that he was dying satisfied at having ended his life in the best way he could have wished. That is why, as you see, I do not even wear mourning." He shook his light fawn coat as to show it. His livid lip over his missing teeth was trembling. His eyes were watery and motionless, and soon after he ended with a shrill laugh, which might well have been a sob. Quite so," agreed the others. The woman, who, bundled in a corner under her coat, had been sitting and listening, had for the last 3 months tried to find the words of her husband and her friends, something to console her in her deep sorrow, something that might show her how a mother should resign herself to send her son not even to death, but to a probable danger of life. Yet not a word had she found amongst the many that had been said, and her grief had been greater in seeing that nobody, as she thought, could share her feelings. Because at this point, all of these other people were talking about what a glory and what an honor it is to serve your country. Even the man who just talked about the loss of his son said that it was an honor that it happened for him like this. By now, the words of the traveler amazed and almost stunned her. She suddenly realized that it wasn't the others who were wrong and could not understand her, but herself, who could not rise up to the same height of those fathers and mothers willing to resign themselves without crying, not only to the departure of their sons, but even to their death. She lifted her head. She bent over from her corner, trying to listen with great attention to the details which the fat man was giving to his companions about the way his son had fallen as a hero for his king and his country, happy and without regrets. It seemed to her that she had stumbled into a world she had never dreamt of, a world so far unknown to her, and she was so pleased to hear everyone joining in congratulating that brave father who could so stoically speak of his child's death. Then suddenly, just as if she had heard nothing of what had been said, and almost as if waking up from a dream, she turned to the old man, asking him, "Then is your son really dead?" Everyone stared at her. The old man, too, turned to look at her, fixing his great, bulging, horribly watery, light gray eyes deep in her face. For some time he tried to answer, but words failed him. He looked and looked at her, almost as if only then, at that silly, incongruous question, he had suddenly realized at last that his son was really dead, gone forever, forever. His face contracted, became horribly distorted. Then he snatched in haste a handkerchief from his pocket and, to the amazement of everyone, broke into harrowing, heart-breaking, uncontrollable sobs. The end. A lot can be said to this story, and when you go to read All Quiet, you will see several instances of parents behaving just like all of these other parents on this train car. You will hear them talking about what an honor it is to serve their country, to serve their fatherland, and they try to use a lot of the language, the verbiage that the government has given them, showing them all of these wonderful posters and how glorious and brave it's going to be for these boys, but trying to pair what the government is telling them compared to the realization that this child's not gonna come home. He won't ever have another Christmas. Trying to pair what the government says to how it's going to affect real life and families is a very different thing, and I think that Pirandello does a really great job of expressing that to us.